Now, just so I get it on tape, your true name is Reginald
Reginald J. Yes, Clizbe.
Clizbe. Where, did you grow up around this area, or are you?
Well, I was born in Montana, a ranch. Moved to Centralia, Washington. In I must have been 1927. Went to a lot of school there, including 2 years of college, and then went to West Point, and got my wings after I graduated in the Artillery Corps, and changed to the Air Corps, of course, and just in time to do a little aerial combat in World War II.
So what year did you go to West Point?
36 to 40.
Oh, okay. So you were in, and I assume being at West Point, you had a pretty good idea of possibly what America was facing.
Yes, we had a very profound professor called Buchema, who was the first geopolitician in the world, I think. The State Department wanted to have him the worst way, but he was more proud to be an Army colonel. But he told us how things were going and lectured us, said war was inevitable, and it was a most interesting experience.
How did a young kid from Centralia end up at West Point? How did you decide to do that?
Well, as a quick do, I was the second year of college in Centralia College, and I felt the war was coming and that I would be involved, of course. Then I saw an advertisement or something about West Point. You could become a professional, and I thought it'd be a good idea to go there and learn how to fight, and whether I was civilian or military. It was a thing to do, and that's what I did.
What did your dad do?
My dad was a nurseryman.
So are you the first in the military line then, or?
In the long past, my family was quite military, but not in recent years except for me and my brother.
So where were you when Pearl Harbor happened? Do you remember that?
Oh God, I'll say I do. I was at Fresno, California, just having moved down there from McCord, and we were just cadreed from a different group, and we're building ourselves up. And I remember I was actually at the front gate, Fresno, California, when we got the news.
How'd you get the news? Radio or?
Radio.
I've heard a lot of people describe an immediate change. Now, but a lot of those were civilians talking about everything that happened. From your point, was there immediate change from here were soldiers that were drilling and practicing to here we are now in a different mode?
Well, there's that attitude, of course. Of course, they knew they were at war, and training became more meaningful. They were more diligent in their training, and we wanted to get the best outfit we could to go to battle. Yes, it was a change, of course.
How old were you?
I was 24.
So compared to a lot of the kids that came in, you were probably one of those ones they called Pop at 24 years old.
Well, I had a squadron. I got a squadron as a second lieutenant, so I was accelerated, of course.
What planes did you fly?
During World War II, we started with the A-20 Douglas, a light attack bomber, a lot of machine guns on it, quite a capacity for bombs, designed particularly to fly at low level and do that work. We found ourselves flying at low level and medium altitude both, because we got ourselves a bombing capability and level bombing capability. It was a very exciting airplane, an exciting type of war. We went over first. You want me just to ramble?
Yeah, no. If I have a question, I'll jump in. But you.
Well, in 1942, we had war games in North Carolina. We'd come from McCord to Fresno, and then Will Rogers Field, Oklahoma. We had field exercises in North Carolina with the Army, of course, and from there we picked up our airplanes at St. Louis, took them across the ocean with a lot of fuel in the tanks that filled the bomb bay. Went from Maine to Newfoundland to Greenland, Iceland, Scotland, and down to England. And did a few operations out of England. And then one day we were told to all be at ready the next morning, and we're going to have a pretty interesting exercise. And the exercise was to throw things in a box and dress and go down to Land's End for the African invasion. And this we did, and interestingly, I acquired a little Labrador pup that hadn't been weaned yet for proprietress of a pub that was near our base at Sculthorpe. I damn near gave the operation away because I went that night before things happened. Said, I want my puppy, said, but he isn't weaned. I've got to have my puppy. And I walked out with him, headed down to Africa in my flying jacket. Didn't wet me, didn't bother me at all. He was my great pal during World War II.
Did he have a name?
Tarfu. And Ernie Pyle loved him. He stayed with us a few days. Has my dog all about him in Brave Men, one of his books.
And where does Tarfu come from? I know Snafu.
Well, situation normal, all fouled up. Tarfu was, things are really screwed up. And
that's the translation, right?
Fubar, fouled up beyond all recognition, you know. There are a few.
I was going to say, those are the very politically correct translations.
Yeah.
So Tarfu flew with you then?
Not on combat missions, but he flew from when we made moves, yeah.
Did he kind of become a mascot?
He knew everybody in the group, and he was a favorite dog, I think, of every country we were in.
Did he come home with you, or did he stay over?
I brought him home a few months early, just for that purpose. Elliott Roosevelt had made a big screw up when he bragged about bringing his dogs flying, you know. And I knew it was going to be difficult to get my dog in the country, so I just made a special stab at it, and he was so well disciplined. I could go out and feed him and everything at night and put him under the seat and tell him stay there. He stayed there all flight. The flight crew didn't know they had a dog aboard. I got to the States, and what are the people that put you through that examine you when you come in?
Customs?
Customs. Got through it, and I said, well, I've got to make a breast of it. I have a dog that's been with me all the war, and I'm going to keep him. So I didn't hear what you said. You let me walk the dog away. So I got him in the country, and he died a couple of years later.
Was he your, kind of your,
Mascot?
well, sanity, was he your piece of home or security or?
Well, he was to all of us in the outfit, I think. I think most of us liked dogs, and Tarfu was so special that everybody had a piece of him.
I never thought about it, because we've only talked to one other person that talked about their pet, but I never thought about your Tarfu. You probably never had to worry about going on a mission and not coming back. So you could
Oh,
be friends
there would
with
have been 1,000 people taking him, you know, want him. But when I did go on a mission, I remember several times, particularly in the grape orchards in Italy, I'd take him out to the airplane and set him under the tree in the shade. Say, stay there, Tarf. He wouldn't budge till I got back on the ground. He was almost human.
What were some of your missions and duties of what you were bombing? Or?
Well, I had a squadron most of the war, and then had staff duty intermittently in the group headquarters. Of course, I preferred the squadron work, the fighting, to anything else. We moved, I think I figured 31 times during the course of World War II. In the invasion, we landed at the capital of the country, Port Leote, and then we straightened ourselves out at Casas near Casablanca for a few weeks, then went to Tunisia and were fighting Rommel till he came off the continent, and then went on up Italy and up into Germany, all during the war. And I stayed there till after VE Day, Victory Europe. The missions were varied. As I said, we carried a tremendous amount of armament and a lot of machine gun firepower. And we were trying to get Rommel and tried to get his tanks. Our machine guns didn't bother his tanks at all. It was a difficult thing to get them because you had to have that bomb right at the tank. So we'd go out in this desert and this tanks would be rolling, and we'd try to drop the bombs so that they'd lodge in the tracks of the tank or under the tank. It had the 5 to 7 second delay, so we could get out of the road and when the bomb went off. The thing was, we flew very low to do that, and quite often we'd come home with bad damage from the tank antenna. Sometimes we'd have them in our wings, sometimes just a big cut in the wing where we'd hit an antenna.
When you say low, how? You're talking real low.
Oh, in an airplane like that, and with experience and training we had, we'd fly as low as 5 or 6 feet. We'd have to raise up to get over the tank, actually, because we wanted to get that bomb under it. And we attacked enemy troop concentrations that way. It was devastating. We'd carry different type of bomb and so on. Then we'd fly missions that when they got up in the Alps, we'd fly at 10 or 12,000 feet, level bomb. And then we did night interdiction. Germans had a free highway at night, and we had to stop them, and we devised all kinds of plans and strategies to catch them at night and make the roads unusable for them.
Boy, then, so you actually did night flying then, or did you try to destroy the roads during the day?
No, the fighters took care of them during the day. They were pretty scarce on the highways during the day. But at night, as soon as it got dark, they'd come in massive amounts. They had to get a lot of material to supply their troops. And we just tried to devise strategies to rob them of the roads and get them on the roads. So,
because nowadays we have all this infrared technology and lasers, but you were pretty much more...
Well, what we did, just an example, there's what they call a link trainer, where you fly your airplane, or you pretend to fly an airplane, and it's an examination tool. It has all the attributes of an airplane flying. You're right in a room sitting in it. And there are certain ways that you can make blind landings that way and so on. Well, we used the audio of that machine at one time and had calculated at what point in space you had to drop a bomb to hit a certain target. And by means of that audio from that machine, we could fly that leg of a beam and with a notice, salvo our bombs or drop them in the trail. But it was quite accurate. But you say you don't have radar and so on. That's right, but we got along pretty well with that.
When you were doing the open highway, was that high elevation bombing, or were you back down on the low elevation?
We tried to get as low as we could. We were very skillful at acquired night vision. Before we would get in the airplane, we'd put red goggles on, and we'd fly in that with red goggles, and then have no light in the cockpit whatsoever, and we could see ever so good when we took those goggles off. We had visual purple on our eyes, and we could see until a flashlight would burn it off immediately, but we got started on the road maybe anyway at, fairly low level. And then once you got fires going there, you could use those for continuing your attack.
So if you have no lights on in your cockpit, what about your instruments? I mean, did you get enough vision that, or you flew the seat of your pants?
No, the instruments was visible. They were a non-damaging color. They were infrared lights.
Was a lot of this technology and theories that were developed during World War II? So you were...
We were doing it, yeah.
As you faced a new challenge.
Yeah.
Do you think that's some of what made America so successful, that the creative minds like that?
Oh, there's no question about it. You'd see it everywhere. Within a squadron, the armament people would come across ways to load the airplanes faster and better. And the maintenance people would make breakthroughs in repairing hydraulic systems. Intelligence people got very skillful in their analyses. Yes, American ingenuity, I think, was very instrumental in our success. Very proud of people.
Is there, again, our political climate has changed so much, and with the wars that have happened in between. When you went out on a mission, do you face a moral dilemma at all, or is it just, can you separate and say it's just enemy, or do you use some word or thought to remove people? Or?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I like to mention this. For a good part of the war, I just had a burning hatred of the enemy. Absolutely unreasoning hatred. And I thought that's the way I had to be to fight well. And I think I was successful in taking the war to them. But when Ernie Pyle stayed with me, do you know Ernie Pyle? Oh, it was, I guess second or third night. He stayed in my tent because I didn't have any other place for him. And he said, Reg, do you mind if I make a very personal observation to you? A criticism, actually. I said, no, I don't, Ernie. I'll accept it, certainly. And he said, you're ruining your life. You're corrupting yourself. And I just hate to see you do it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you hate the enemy so bitterly. He said, you're getting to be hateful. He said, I understand it. But he says, you notice me in the tent. I pray every morning on my knees, and you hear me. Pray for my wife. Pray for my country. Pray for the servicemen. Then pray for the German families, Japanese families. He says, you know their mothers and fathers in Germany and Japan and Russia and so on, just like yours. He said, you got to be professional. You can't hate. You've got to understand that you've got to do the job. You've got to kill them, and kill them as best you can. But don't gloat in it. And you might say a prayer for them after you get back. And that answers your question, I think. I think he saved my life, really, as a human being, by criticizing me.
Is that a thing that, and again, it does sound like you did, because you could have continued to be, probably carried that on past the war. Did he give you a separation from war world to peace world so you could separate those two? Or?
Well, no, but it's attitudinal, I think, sort of thing. Instead of seeing your enemy as a bloodthirsty son of a bitch, you see him as a human being that you got to kill, because that's what you're doing. That's for your country. But don't take any gloating attitude out of it. Come back and pray for his soul, and be thankful that you're safe. And it's an attitude you carry, peace and war. It just changed my life.
Boy, that's, because I've heard and read some of Ernie Pyle and read some of Ernie Pyle's material, but for you to have a chance to meet Ernie Pyle, who I've heard so many people talk about articles he's written and things that stood out in their mind from the war, and that they have him personally change your life.
Well, that man had a horrible personal family life. And you just almost cry to know about it. Quickly, his wife was alcoholic. He got her to stop. Came overseas. She started again. He went back, divorced her. He said, well, that'll do it. It didn't do it, so he went back and married her again and got her to stop. And it was just a burden on him every minute. And I was sure sorry to see him killed in the Pacific. He was with one of my West Point friends when it happened. Japanese sniper got him.
Did you have anybody back home? Girlfriend, wife?
No. Matter of fact, that's kind of one very great incentive for fighting. I knew that if I survived, I would want to be a family man, have a wife and children. And I knew if we didn't win the war, I wouldn't have an opportunity to do that the way I'd like to.
What was the best part of being in the service for you? What did you enjoy?
Our people that worked. I could just mention 1,000 things about the wonderful people we had working. We had 2 men in the armament section. After we got through with war in Tunisia, the British, of course, they'd been after Rommel, their army came up. And these 2 guys just went out and picked a fight with the brawny people from the desert, beat hell out of them. The commander came to see me. He said, please keep those men home. And Lewis and St. Clair were their names. Before we went overseas, St. Clair, was a staff sergeant, and he actually drank too much and didn't meet his appointments. I told him after the first deal, I said, I'm going to break you to private if this happens again. Just know that. Oh, 3 or 4 months later he did it and came into me, pulled off his chevrons, said, I'll show you I can be as good a private as I was a staff sergeant. The mess sergeant pretty soon was telling how good he peeled the potatoes and washed the dishes and everything, and he worked himself back up. Just, people, unusual people like that. Another master sergeant called Sergeant Raines, head of the maintenance. Some of the young lieutenants, I guess I was a young lieutenant too, but I thought I was older. But some of them would call him Pop, like the airmen did. He came to me and said, I don't like to be called Pop by officers. He said, I'm Sergeant Raines. And they're sir to me. And that's where it should be. Oh, I loved it. I ate these lieutenants out. It was a hell of a good lesson.
What was the hardest part of the service for you?
I guess once in a while you'd, get working more than you should. And you just have a numbing tiredness that just, you couldn't hardly work through it. And it dropped off and you go ahead, but once in a while that happened. But I didn't look for bad things. So I didn't have I don't remember your question precisely. But
Just what was the hardest part of it?
oh, there are incidents that come that, like one of the airplanes couldn't get rid of its bombs, and they came out over the field, and I told them to go out and open the bomb bay and jiggle the airplane and so on and so forth. And then I told them to go on up and bail out. Couldn't get rid of the bomb. It was just by one hangar in the bomb bay. And they came by and jiggled the last time, and the bomb blew up. And it was hard picking up the fingers and toes and bones of these people, because I wouldn't let the combat troops do it. The non-combat troops clean up the remains, but they're all my friends. Pretty sad to see them go that way.
Did you then, being a squadron leader, was it your responsibility to write home to these kids' parents?
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh, you had to do that.
Yeah.
Is that, I can't even imagine having to, what you say or how you begin to write a letter to somebody that...
Well, it's awfully hard. And there's one cardinal thing: be honest. Be honest and as complete as you can without being unnecessarily cruel. They want to know the details. They want to be told, authoritatively.
Would they write you back sometimes
Yes, yes. Quite often, as a matter of fact. Very nice letters.
I know Hollywood always makes it that they want to know that he was a good kid, or is that the types of things that people really, in reality, want to know, or is that Hollywood?
No, that's true. That's what they want to know. Before you write a letter, it was my custom to get 2 or 3 of his friends or sort of close associates and talk to them and incorporate things they observed, experienced with him, and made it more authentic.
So you could give them both the sadness of it, the tragedy, but also
Oh yeah,
here's this living
Yeah.
kid that
yeah. One of the things you talk about, American ingenuity. You can't believe how we lived on the desert in Tunisia there for a while. We had no parts, no aluminum, nothing to repair the aircraft, getting the hell shot out of us. And maintenance sergeant found out that some of the tin cans were best. Put them on the wings. Riveted it instead of aluminum. It worked for a while, and when we finally got the aluminum, we put it on. And you know, those rascals could just do anything.
You know, the interesting thing is, and it's good to hear you talk about those people, because in Andy Rooney's book, he talked about some veterans that haven't talked about World War II, and for a variety of reasons. Some it was too hard, but there were some that felt that being a maintenance person, a supply person, they said they came back and there were all these parades for the heroes, and they said, we weren't on the front, we weren't this or that, but you know, the way you describe them, which is true, they were just as important as the person on the front line, because without all of this, that could have never happened.
That's true. You know, the units in the Air Corps, and I assume that's true in the Army, Navy, and Marines, so on, during the war, they got where they were pretty bare bones. If they found a job that didn't quite require a man's time and skill, they'd incorporate part of that job with others and get rid of the person, you know, because you don't want people working half the time. That's a bad morale factor. You want everybody working like hell, working their butts off. And that's really how you have a happy unit in wartime.
It's interesting, because I never thought about that. Yeah, I could see where in 2 ways that would cause a morale problem. One is people looking and saying, well, there's so-and-so, they're just sitting around, and we're working hard over here. And then you're bored if you're working half-time, so you get in trouble. And the morale must have been, was that a challenge to keep morale up, or because of our patriotism, we knew we were doing?
I don't know. I really didn't have morale problems with my units. I think because we were working hard, and I was careful to let everybody know what we were doing. If a man was loading machine guns, he wanted to know what happened, you know, or a man in the mess hall would do. So I'd brief them very frequently on our operations. And I think that helped him.
Did you have, now your rank was what again? What was your rank at this time?
Light colonel.
So, and you're 20-some years old, and so you've got these, quote, young kids
Yeah.
who are 18, 19, 20 underneath you. Did they come and console with you? Did they try to talk with you personally, or did everybody kind of keep in their own mind? I mean, average everyday stuff, just to say, you know, I'm lonely out here, or homesick, or I miss my wife or kids, and I'm having a tough time, or...
No, I didn't get too much of that. Once in a while, comment. We had doctors in our squadron, flight surgeons, that became absolutely wonderful consultants to people that had any physical or mental handicap. Then there our chaplain, whether he was a Catholic, a Protestant, some denomination, it didn't make a bit of difference. They were important to the people. And, I think they took a lot of flack. I just don't know, but it's part of their work anyway.
What did your group talk about when you had downtime, if you did have downtime? You talk about home, or again, the movies make it that all that these service people talked about was women, but I found that that's really not.
You know, my memory is not as sharp as it was 50 years ago. But, God, I don't remember anybody dwelling on women. I just don't. Sure, we have a joke about them and this and that. But as far as sitting around mooning about women, I didn't see it. I guess people weren't working hard enough. They had time to do that.
What about, which again, it's tough because you were, especially if you moved to 31 different spots and you were constantly working, but was there some stress relief or fun times that you helped your squadron with?
Oh, yeah. You really had a hard time finding it during the Tunisian War, but you had Roman ruins back in the back country there. You had Arab sheep herders, camel herders. You could let your men have a little free time and go out and visit something like that. Well worthwhile. And we try to get literature about the place we were, you know, so people could read about it. Sometimes we got lectures. Now, in Africa, it was interesting that we were working a lot with the Free French. And we got a lot of our bombing information from General de Gaulle. Saw him a couple times there. And Eisenhower came down while we were living in actually underground. Put his feet up on my field desk and talked a while. Those are interesting occasions.
Was he, from what you saw of him, a nice guy?
Who?
Eisenhower?
Oh, he was of course he was fitting himself to the company scheme, but he's like an old shoe, you know. I kept that desk he put his feet on until we had to fly emergency change of station from Italy to France, and I lost it. I was going to keep that the rest of my life.
So even then, because it's interesting, because there's a lot of things that historically for us are names that stick out or places, but when they're happening aren't necessarily noticed. But when Eisenhower came, you knew this was Eisenhower.
Well, I'll tell you why. We were operating not at an airfield. It was about a square mile of bunch grass, sand, no big stones or anything in it. It was just we didn't have such thing as a runway. Our aircraft were exposed. We were bombed or strafed every day or two. And we lived underground. There's an old irrigation system that Arabs had there. We plugged that up and lived in underground, really. So we had some resourcefulness there too. Everybody knew how to build their own stoves, everything else.
Again, resourcefulness happens in a lot of ways. I've heard of bomber pilots flying up to altitude to make ice cream in like a garbage can, and I've heard of other ones that would take their beer if they wanted to cool it, put it in a sock, and then dip it in the airplane fuel, and then fly it around as it sublimed off. It would cool their beer. So everybody was finding ingenious ways to do everything and fight the war, but also to.
Well, the first time we got beer ration in Talept, it was a big one because we didn't have it for months. I sent an airplane up with all the beer it could hold and brought it down cold. And this sure it was expensive to the country, but I'll tell you, it sure did the troops good.
Now, the one thing nobody's been able to tell me is what type of beer they had.
Various types, really, yeah.
Because I know cigarettes, everybody talks about Lucky Strike, Camel.
Yeah, they had the major brands.
But I think it sounds like a lot of the guys said, "Hey, we're just glad to finally have a beer." Who cared what?
Yeah.
Do you remember where you were when you heard the peace treaty was being signed?
Yeah. I forget the name of the little village. It was in France. And we were flying missions in Germany over Berchtesgaden and so on, where Hitler's retreat was. And where and when we heard it.
Was that, do you feel like, well, we were at war last minute and we're done with war now, or what was the mood there?
We had the Japs to deal with yet. War wasn't finished. It was a big plug of it, but we still had to. We didn't feel the war was over. I didn't anyway.
Did you get sent to the South Pacific then, or?
No, I was anxious to go there, but I was sent to Pentagon. I didn't like the Pentagon.
How come?
Oh, it's the capital of the world, Washington, and Pentagon is a big part of it. But after having been flying and free, it was a very confining thing. I learned that a lot of the materiel people were being sent to Harvard Business School to learn how to handle their supplies and buy equipment and so on and so on. And I had the temerity to write a memorandum to the Chief of Staff saying it appeared that he had a wonderful program for officers that were handling materials, and I didn't see a commensurate program for officers who were handling people, which is a much more important commodity. I got out of the Pentagon and sent to Harvard Business School.
Somebody didn't appreciate your letter?
Yeah, matter of fact, they got a lot of people. At least they got the word, and it started a flow of other than material people.
Do you, this is kind of a two-part question. Have the history books left something out of World War II? And is there a message that needs to be left for the future generations to come that you and I may never meet?
I can't answer that question. I'll tell you why. I have never seen a war movie. I've never read a history book of World War II. And I'm not going to. I just, what's the reason? I have no reason to do it, and I haven't done it.
Do you think it's important for somebody that wasn't there to read a history book?
I sure do. Yes, it shouldn't be forgotten. And I haven't forgotten it, but I haven't chosen to expose myself to the feelings I would have if I were to see a war movie or read a history. I have deep feelings.
Patriot?
Huh?
Patriotic?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's selfish. I just, I think reading and looking at movies would make me remember moments I don't want to live again about the war. Because that's what they're there. That's what they're trying to do to the audience. Show them what war's like, and I don't need that.
You already know.
Yeah.
And it sounds like something that best put behind. You did your job, you did your duty.
Well, I feel that way.
Did you, were you at Korea then too? Did you end up in Korea too, or?
Yes, I went to Korea for 2 years. Actually, I was going to get out of the service. And at the same time I put in my papers, the Chief of Staff called me and said that he was aware of what I'd done in World War II to interdict aircraft at night. And they had the same problem in Korea. And would I go? And of course I went. Stayed 2 years.
What did you do after the war?
Which war?
All of the wars. Did you go to Vietnam too, or just?
Well, I was director of operations of the Air Force for 2 years while Vietnam was on. I went over there several times, of course. After I got out of the service, I worked for the Washington Water Power Company, a public utility, or private utility, electricity and gas, about $1 billion business, and enjoyed 12 years with them. I was anxious to kind of apply some of the Harvard teachings and get a taste of civilian life too. And of course, at that time, they made you retire at age 65. So I reached 65 in 1981. So I haven't had a paying job since then.
Family?
Yes. Very proud of my family.
And what do you do for enjoyment now?
Well, I would like to be playing golf right now. I'll be tomorrow morning. And I read and I play golf, play bridge, socialize, symphony. Diversified interests. They're more meaningful to me now than they were earlier, really. Kind of keep you going.
One final question, you know, especially nowadays with 911 and all that, all of a sudden the American patriotism has come out and everybody's flying the flag and all this is happening. People are looking at the hospital and I'm the recipient of the hard work that all these people do. My generation is so fortunate, spoiled. Do you, when you look back or when you look at yourself, do you consider yourself a hero for what you did in World War II, or how do you get there?
The job that I was proud to do, and that's about it. I'm glad I decided to get myself trained for it, for West Point. I think I served my country fairly well. I'm proud of what I did. Thank you.
And I'll get you unmiked here. So, is any